after he had fixed it up a little. So, as long as he didn't have to build a brand new house, he could afford the time to watch his cousin Paddy. Perhaps he hoped that Paddy would ask his advice. But Paddy did nothing of the kind. He had seen Jerry Muskrat's house, and he had smiled, but he had taken great pains not to let Jerry see that smile. He wouldn't have hurt Jerry's feelings for the world. He is too polite and good-natured to do anything like that. So Jerry sat on the end of an old log and watched Paddy work. The first thing to build was the foundation. This was of mud and grass, with sticks worked into it to hold it together. Paddy dug the mud from the bottom of his new pond, and because the pond was new, there was a great deal of grassy sod there, which was just what Paddy needed. It was very convenient. Jerry watched a little while, and then, because Jerry is a worker himself, he just had to get busy and help. Rather timidly he told his big cousin that he would like to have a share in building the new house.
"All right," replied Paddy. "That will be fine. You can bring mud while I am getting the sticks and grass."
So Jerry dived down to the bottom of the pond and dug up mud and piled it on the foundation and was happy. The little stars looked down and twinkled merrily as they watched the two workers. So the foundation grew and grew down under the water. Jerry was very much surprised at the size of it. It was ever and ever so much bigger than the foundation for his own house. You see, he had forgotten how much bigger Paddy is. Each night Jerry and Paddy worked, resting during the daytime. Occasionally Bobby Coon or Reddy Fox or Unc' Billy Possum or Jimmy Skunk would come to the edge of the pond to see what was going on. Peter Rabbit came every night, but they couldn't see much because, Paddy and Jerry were working under water. But at last Peter was rewarded. There, just above the water, was a splendid platform of mud and grass and sticks. A great many sticks were carefully laid as soon as the platform was above the water, for Paddy was very particular about this. You see, it was to be the floor for the splendid room he was planning to build. When it suited him, he began to pile mud in the very middle. Jerry puzzled and puzzled over this. Where was Paddy's room going to be, if he piled up the mud that way? But he didn't like to ask questions, so he kept right on helping. Paddy would dive down to the bottom and then come up with double handfuls of mud, which he held against his chest. He would scramble out onto the platform and waddle over to the pile in the middle, where he would put the mud and pat it down. Then back to the bottom for more mud. And so the mud pile grew and grew until it was quite 2 feet high.
"Now,"
said Paddy,
"I'll build the walls, and I guess you can't help me much with those. I'm going to begin them to-morrow night. Perhaps you would like to see me do it, Cousin Jerry?"
"I certainly will," replied Jerry, still puzzling over that pile of mud in the middle. Chapter 11. Peter Rabbit and Jerry Muskrat are puzzled. Jerry Muskrat was more and more sure that his big cousin, Paddy the Beaver, didn't know quite so much as he might about house building. Jerry would have liked to offer some suggestions, but he didn't quite dare. You see, he was very anxious not to displease his big cousin. But he felt that he simply had got to speak his mind to some one, so he swam across to where he had seen Peter Rabbit almost every night since Paddy began to build. Sure enough, Peter was there, sitting up very straight and staring with big round eyes at the platform of mud and sticks out in the water where Paddy the Beaver was at work.
"Well, Peter, what do you think of it?"
asked Jerry.
"What is it?"
asked Peter innocently.
"Is it another dam?"
Jerry threw back his head and laughed and laughed. Peter looked at him suspiciously.
"I don't see anything to laugh at,"
said he.
"Why, it's a house, you stupid. It's Paddy's new house,"
replied Jerry, wiping the tears of laughter from his eyes.
"I'm not stupid,"
retorted Peter.
"How was I to know that that pile of mud and sticks is meant for a house? It certainly doesn't look it. Where is the door?" "Well, to tell you the truth, I don't think it is much of a house myself," replied Jerry.
It has got a door, all right. In fact, it has got three. You can't see them because they are under water, and there is a passage from each right up through that platform of mud and sticks, which is the foundation of the house. It really is a very fine foundation, Peter. It really is. But what I can't understand is what Paddy is thinking by building that great pile of mud right up in the middle. When he gets his walls built, where will his bedroom be? There won't be any room at all. It won't be a house at all, just a big, useless pile of sticks and mud.
Peter scratched his head and then pulled his whiskers thoughtfully as he gazed out at the pile in the water where Paddy the Beaver was at work.
"It does look foolish, that's a fact,"
said he.
"Why don't you point out to him the mistake he's making, Jerry? You have built such a splendid house yourself that you ought to be able to help Paddy and show him his mistakes."
Jerry had smiled a very self-satisfied smile when Peter mentioned his fine house, but he shook his head at the suggestion that he should give Paddy advice.
I don't just like to," he confessed. "You know, he might not like it, and it doesn't seem as if it would be quite polite."
Peter sniffed.
"That wouldn't trouble me any if he were my cousin," said he.
Jerry shook his head.
"No, I don't believe it would,"
he replied.
"But it does trouble me, and, well, I think I'll wait a while."
Now all this time Paddy had been hard at work. He was bringing the longest branches which he had cut from the trees out of which he had built his dam, and a lot of slender willow and alder poles. He pushed these ahead of him as he swam. When he reached the foundation of his house, he would lean them against the pile of mud in the middle with their big ends resting on the foundation. So he worked all the way around until by and by the mud pile in the middle couldn't be seen. It was completely covered with sticks, and they were cunningly fastened together at the tops. End of Chapter 11 and end of Section 3. Recording by John Leader, Bloomington, Illinois.